Because of time constraints, I propose that we take 4 questions, 2 from each side, one after the other, and then our speakers get an opportunity for a blitzkrieg answer to all 4 of them before we move to the final round, which will be the round of the closing statements by the 2 sides. So if you can please ask your question, make it very succinct.
Okay, so my name is Gary, and this question is for Dr. Brooks. And so you said that Bill Gates creates economic value, but how can people who are at or below the poverty line seek to create economic value when they don't have the quality of freedom, when they are imprisoned by history, when the Black African Americans who live in the US have been imprisoned by the history of the past, they were enslaved and Jim Crow laws, and they don't have the opportunity in the present because they were coerced in the past. How do you explain that?
Okay, thank you. Next one.
My name is Pedro Ferreira, and my question takes 1 second to answer. In the interest of time, I'm going to put it very simply and plainly. Hopefully people will understand the deeper implications it entails. It's a question for Dr. Brook. We started this debate about 1.5 hours ago, and Professor Galbraith was given 10 minutes to put his points across. You were given 10 minutes to put your points across. Would have you been concerned if you had been given 5 minutes? Maybe 2 minutes? What about 0 minutes? Do you care?
Thank you. Next.
My name is Michael. I want to talk about another type of inequality, inequality of conditions. To you, Mr. Brooks. In your ideal society, if you're born with a pre-existing condition or a condition that requires some healthcare services, if the services aren't provided and the parents can't pay for those kids' stuff, are those kids doomed from the start? Thank you.
And one last question from the gentleman.
Hello, my name is Bruce Spink. I'm mostly interested in the theoretical division between the public and the private spheres that has been at kind of the heart of this conversation. It seems like Dr. Brook takes a very hard line in saying that they're very different. The only exception to that was when we were talking about the justice system, and he said that if an economic situation impinges on the public sphere, in this case the courts, that the government has a right to mitigate that. And I'm wondering, given that the statistical impact of the average voter, the median voter in the United States, is almost nothing compared to the real policy effect of those that are either affluent or a member of an interest group, is that the same kind of effect on government by an economic situation as we discussed concerning the Justice Department?
All to me. Thank you. Dr. Brooks, clearly the person to answer first.
Okay, let's see if I get these right. So how can poor people create value when they come, when they've got a history, bad circumstances, whatever? I think the question's insulting to those poor people. If they are free today, they have the capacity to create value. They have the ability to go out there. If what we need to do politically is to make sure that the government is not a factor in discriminating, that the government is not a means to prohibit their advancement. But there is no reason, and you see this all the time, you see poor people succeed all the time. And it's an insult to them to say because their ancestors were slaves, they can't do well today. I mean, that's ridiculous. Every individual can do well today. Well, today is not free. In a free society, every individual can do well, no matter where they come from. I just hired a woman who was chief operating officer of Shell International. She came from a horrific background, a poor background, foster care, and she rose to be a senior person, one of the mightiest businesses in the world. You hear stories like that all the time. So it's insulting to say people can't because of their circumstances. Yes, they can if they're not prohibited from doing it, which was what I think we do today. Minimum wage laws, welfare, and so on are ways in which we institutionalize people into poverty and prevent them from rising. Would I be upset if I only got 5 minutes versus 10 minutes? Well, it depends. I get 5 minutes versus everybody else's 10 minutes all the time. Watch television sometime. I get like one spot a month, and everybody else gets everything else. Bill O'Reilly has a whole show. Damn it, that's not fair. So So it depends on the contract. It depends on the relationship. You know, we agreed to equal time. You know, maybe under different circumstances, it wouldn't have been equal time. We could have come up with some other agreement. Maybe could have been some side payments to compensate. Who knows what kind of structure we could come up with. But I'm in the minority all the time. I can guarantee you. I agree with Professor Galbraith in the sense that nobody agrees with me, right? So if you put this to a vote in the American people, I lose. So I have less time. It makes sense to me. Kids' health care. Again, I think you have two choices, fundamentally. You rely on charity, or you pull out a gun. Those are the only two choices. That's it. And if I believe that pulling out a gun is wrong, and if the charity doesn't materialize, bad stuff happens. And it's sad, but that's the reality of it. Now, I happen to believe that in free societies, people are incredibly charitable, and then in free societies, kids won't be dying. But the reality is, those are the only two options. You either rely on charity, or you rely on force. I believe, on a principled way, that force, coercion is wrong and should never exist in a free society. And the final question was, I think I understand it. So isn't it the existence today of pressure groups that give advantages to certain parts of the population? Isn't that unfair, just like in the justice system? And therefore, shouldn't we do something about that? Shouldn't we correct for that? And my answer is yes, we should. And the way to do it is to get government out of economics. I think government should have no economic policy because it should have no role in economics. I think we should add to our Constitution a separation of state from economics so that the state has no role in economic policy. And if the state has no role in economic policy, there aren't any pressure groups to try to get stuff from the state because the state ain't giving anybody anything. Today, the reason we have all these pressure groups is the state is involved in every economic decision out there. The financial markets are the most regulated markets in America, even after so-called deregulation. So surprise, surprise, the different gangs of pressure groups line up to try to get whatever resources they can out of government that is trying to... So you saw the orgy around Dodd-Frank, which was about all these groups trying to get these regulators to give them something at the expense of somebody else.
We're running out of time for this segment.
So that's it.
Okay. So
what is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute. That man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it. And that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality, which has so far been believed impossible, namely, a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason. A morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
How does objectivism differ from the philosophies that many of us have been exposed to in our youths? Philosophies based upon religions, theologians, dogmatists.
The very first difference, objectivism tells you that it is not right, it is not proper to man to take anything on faith. Religion is a matter of faith. You accept a religion emotionally or because you were born to it. You have not chosen it rationally. What objectivism will tell you is that reason, man's reason is his basic means of survival. That is the most important faculty which he has, and he has to guide his life and make his choices by means of his rational faculty. He has to make his own choices, but he has to know how to make them. it is immoral for him to act on his emotions, to be guided by the whim of the moment. That objectivism holds as very wrong, very immoral. And morality, in fact, consists of following your reason to the best of your ability. So that rationality is the basic virtue from which all the others proceed.
My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people, nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
Tell me this.